1,90,000 रुपए का दिया और 1,00,000 रुपए का, ऐसे 2,90,000।
सबसे पहले पैसे की ही बात करते हैं। अभी घर में 3-3 लोगों को हो गया है because electric।
I think by now you all know how private hospitals have been charging lakhs of rupees for COVID-19 treatment. अभी 4 दिन पहले तक दिल्ली के प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स 25,000 रुपए चार्ज कर रहे थे पर डे फॉर आइसोलेशन बेड्स, 34,000 से 43,000 रुपए चार्ज कर रहे थे फॉर ICU बेड्स विदाउट वेंटिलेटर्स और 44,000 से 54,000 रुपए चार्ज कर रहे थे पर डे फॉर ICU बेड्स विद वेंटिलेटर्स. एंड ऑल ऑफ दिस डिडंट इवन इंक्लूड द PPE चार्जेस. Which means 7 से 10 दिन की ट्रीटमेंट का खर्चा लाखों में था. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स और दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट ने फाइनली इंटरवीन किया एंड दे फिक्स्ड द रेट फॉर प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स एट 1/3 of the current price they were charging. Most of the states have also fixed the rate for private hospitals treating COVID patients. But this brings me to the question that why are private hospitals in India so expensive in the first place? Somehow मुझे लगता है हम लोगों ने एक्सेप्ट कर लिया कि प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स तो एक्सपेंसिव होंगे ही, चाहे वो प्रॉफिट मेकिंग बिजनेस ही हो, बट एटलीस्ट सर्विसेज तो दे रहे हैं. गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल्स कौन जाएगा, उनकी हालत देखिए. बट ऐसा क्यों लगता है हमें? I can think of 2 reasons. First, that private healthcare sector has never been truly regulated in our country, and second, that public healthcare system has always been neglected. Okay, first let's talk about why it's been so difficult to regulate the private healthcare sector in our country. Basically, we do have in our country a Clinical Establishment Registration and Regulation Act of 2010, which does have some regulation about the quality of health services provided by the private sector. But when price regulation amendments were being introduced in the act, it was rejected by the government at that time. And since then, only 10 states and 6 union territories have implemented it. The act mostly remains on paper.
You have to also keep in mind that the private healthcare sector is very politically very connected. When it comes to healthcare, all the people whom the Prime Minister's office, Honorable Prime Minister, hears are the Devi Shettis and the four Trehans and the big private corporate players. This is like a typical Indian family where the private sector is treated as the boy child. It's almost been handed over the best things, subsidies, without ever trying to rule it, ever trying to regulate it and say that this is not okay, you can't do this. It's really unfortunate that we have a health system which is dominated by the greed and by profit, logic of profit. We need concrete efforts, political efforts to change that.
This brings me to my next point, that why public healthcare services have always been neglected in our country. You know, our government hospitals suck because we spend just 1% of our GDP on public healthcare systems. Bangladesh even spends more than us. It spends 2.37% of its GDP on healthcare. Bhutan spends 2.5%. Sri Lanka spends 1.6% of its GDP on healthcare. Even though Sri Lanka spends just 1.6% of its GDP on healthcare, 90% of its people go to government hospitals for treatment, and they do get good treatment. It is estimated that by 2030, India will need 20,70,000 doctors. There is a shortage of 6 lakh doctors in our country right now. One doctor attends to 11,082 people, which is 10 times more than what the WHO recommends. रूरल एरियाज की तो और वाट लगी हुई है. 15,700 प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर सेंटर्स में सिर्फ एक डॉक्टर है और लगभग 2,000 सेंटर्स में तो डॉक्टर ही नहीं है. और सिर्फ डॉक्टर्स की शॉर्टेज नहीं है, नर्सेज, मिडवाइफ्स, मेल अटेंडेंट्स, फीमेल अटेंडेंट्स, बहुत सारी वेकेंट पोजीशंस हैं अभी. So is there anything which we can learn from other countries? Thailand, which is also a developing country like India, spends almost the same amount of its GDP on healthcare as we do. फिर भी it offers an entire range of healthcare services to all its citizens for free. The biggest plus point is that all the healthcare, including drugs and diagnostics, in the Thai public health system is for free. All it asks for is a voluntary payment of 30 baht, which is approximately 60 rupees, from those who can afford it. Cuba is another example. It has one of the most effective primary healthcare systems in the world, जिसकी foundation community-based polyclinic है, each of which serves an area hosting about 30 to 60,000 people. Yes, India also has a large network of primary healthcare centers where each center is supposed to serve a population of 25,000. But हम सभी को पता है कि reality में ये numbers बहुत ज़्यादा हैं. See, Japan is also dominated by private healthcare sector just like India, but they are not allowed to make profit out of healthcare services. The government has mostly fixed the price for all the healthcare services provided by the private sector, and they review them every year. You know, it's really depressing that for the past 10 years we've just been spending 1% of our GDP on healthcare. अब नीति आयोग ने ये तक प्रपोज कर दिया है कि पब्लिक सेक्टर डिस्ट्रिक्ट हॉस्पिटल्स को प्राइवेट एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को दे देना चाहिए. पब्लिक हेल्थ केयर को प्राइवेटाइज करना इज नॉट द सोल्यूशन. हम लोग प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स इसलिए जाते हैं क्योंकि कोई और ऑप्शन नहीं है. गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल्स ज़्यादातर इनकॉम्पिटेंट है. And that's why we agree to pay whatever the amount the private hospitals ask us to pay because कोई benchmark नहीं है measure करने के लिए या compare करने के लिए prices. Private hospitals को सिर्फ public hospitals competition दे सकते हैं. And when private hospitals are forced to compete with a functioning public health system, both quality and costs improve. Yes, I'm thinking aloud, but what do you think? Tell me in the comments below, and if you like this video, then share it and subscribe to India Times.